Yo, Shanghai Pete here for Degree Listeners. What's poppin', guys? Hope everybody's chilling, maybe scored some time off for the holidays, or at least managed to score some drugs. My family's on the East Coast, I'm stuck in LA, so I didn't, but I hope you did. Things got pretty heated in our Mine episode last week, so I figured it might be cool to just have a little fun today and play some Halo. That's right, it's time to get deep inside with a single-player campaign for Halo Infinite. First things first, let's go over my history with the Halo franchise. I think it's always helpful to know where somebody's coming from in terms of perspective and bias with games and shit like that, so. To that end, you must know, I was never a Halo bro. I was the asshole in GameStop trying to tell you how beneath me you were because Halo 2 appealed to your pedestrian tastes. My feelings have, of course, become a bit more nuanced over the years, and I myself have become at least slightly less insufferable, but at no point was I ever what you'd call like an expert or champion for the Halo series. And that's important to keep in mind as you watch this video. I approach and view this game as an FPS first and foremost, and a Halo game very much second. Like, I get it, you have an AI girlfriend, you're a sci-fi cyber guy with some armor and guns, there are big rings, you shoot aliens, whatever. It's just another FPS to me. The context to all the above is going to be mostly irrelevant in terms of whether or not I like the game and how much fun I have playing it. Halo has never been great, in my opinion. It's been fun, certainly, frustrating, social, even very good, and quite frequently too. But one thing it's never been is great. It's a consistent, like, 7.5 or C+, in my opinion. I know that kind of talk borders on heresy to many people, and honestly, for good reason too. I fully understand and even respect why Halo has the legacy it does and became the institution it has. I agree with it in many respects. Multiplayer, on a console anyway, both couch and over the internet, wasn't really a thing until Xbox Live, or more specifically, Halo. To say that motherfucker revolutionized console gaming would be an understatement, and like I said, I've frequently enjoyed Halo too, just like any normal person. In the early aughts when Xbox Live was barely a thing, couch co-op games, especially FPSs, were like gold. Looking at you, Time Splitters 2, baby. And Halo co-op sessions, especially highly coveted and a common sight around the crib back in the day. That's the only reason we played it though, to have something that we could easily pass a controller around between a bunch of bros. Not because it was like the best game fucking ever. I grew up on Doom 2, Quake, Half-Life, Duke Nukem 3D, shit like that. So beyond the couch co-op, I didn't really understand what all the hype around Halo was. I'd seen all that kind of shit before. The level design was derivative, generally bland with far too much repetition, and the enemy variation was boring as fuck. The little stupid purple aliens giggling at you always seemed fucking retarded to me, and the way they all babbled at you in English was ridiculous. Only like 2 guns were not a complete hassle to use, and any enemy above a basic grunt was the kind of bullet sponge that could easily soak up an entire clip. Now, I point all this out not to say that Halo sucks. Far from it. It doesn't. I would never call Halo bad by any means. Just that when compared to other FPSs that I'd spent the previous 10 years playing on a PC, it just wasn't anything special to me. I didn't get it. Like, it was fun, but to me, Halo was always a C+ FPS that only became anywhere close to an A or an A- if you played with the boys. And to that end, I feel like I need to reiterate just how fucking crazy it was to have couch co-op back then. In an era where Wi-Fi routers were relatively new and shitty technology, and our PCs still used enormous CRT monitors, being able to play co-op FPS games with all your friends using just a TV and an Xbox was a pretty big fucking deal. So big a deal, in fact, that new Halo releases have remained a huge event even almost 20 years later. Like, I've cleared the campaign on Legendary on all of them. As you guys know, I'm a huge FPS junkie, and though I still maintain that under normal circumstances, most of them are like a B at best, I always scoop the new ones. Well, actually, scratch that. I don't think I ever played Halo 5, but I've cleared all the rest at least once, so. Anyway, that's how I feel about Halo. Let's begin by talking about combat. First up, the major issues, because I like to get that kind of stuff out of the way first. Ammo, at the top of the list here. Not quite sure how much of this is like intentional balancing, but I feel as though I'm constantly holding onto weapons that run out of ammo, and as a result I'm always hunting for the right kind so I can use them again. See this screen? Get used to it, you're going to be seeing it a lot. Now, your first thought might be, but Doom Eternal is notorious for its hyper-tuned resource management and ammo scarcity, and you love that game. Yes, I do love that game. The crucial difference between Halo's resource management and Doom Eternal's is that Doom's is an integral part of the gameplay loop. The way that you acquire resources, ammo, armor, health, it informs how you play and handle all situations. You need more health, you're going to have to rush up close and personal, get in their guts with some glory kills. Need ammo, hope your chainsaw is fueled, going to be cutting some motherfuckers apart if you want more bullets. If you want armor, well then it's all about 420 blaze it with the flame burst. You know something about all these scenarios? They all result in adaptive and reactive gameplay choices that inform and reinforce the overall loop and push forward gameplay style the entire game is built and balanced around. Balanced fucking expertly, I might point out. In Halo, there are no major gameplay adaptations or changes that result in me running out of battle rifle ammo. I'm just annoyed that I have to pick up the fucking plasma pistol and will now need an additional 10 minutes to clear the area. Sure, I guess technically that qualifies as a gameplay variation, but it's not a particularly interesting or challenging one. It's just annoying. Now, I don't want to be too uncharitable though. There is a significant amount of strategy required to make the best use of the different weapons and ammo types. Enemies have a variety of strengths and weaknesses, and to survive for very long, especially on harder difficulties, you will need to figure out the best way to take them down. Great, awesome. The issue is not that there's no weapon or resource management here at all. There is, but it's defined more by moment-to-moment decision-making as a response to largely random factors instead of any sort of coherent strategic or practical thinking on the part of the player. See, in Halo, when you run out of ammo, the game gives you basically two choices: run away or find a gun. In Doom, if you've even run out of ammo in the first place, you're already likely doing something or many things wrong. And that's not to say that Doom is perfect and Halo sucks, or even that Halo should be like Doom. It probably shouldn't. I just think that if you're going to design in an intentional ammo resource scarcity, your solution should be based more on promoting proactive strategy from the player and not so much on which gun can you grab the fastest before you die. Good news though, this overall is a relatively minor problem, even though I just spent 3 fucking minutes talking about it, when weighed against a brilliant engine and what is overall great fluid combat design. I'm just an FPS junkie. I like getting into the weeds on this shit. It's really mostly fine. Okay, maybe fine is a little bit of an understatement. It's very good. The combat and maybe more importantly the engine really feel fucking awesome. Within just a couple seconds of moving around, it's immediately obvious just how well the engine is implemented. The gun feedback, weight of the player, and the physics, how you interact with the world are tuned perfectly. Alright, well, I don't want to say perfectly, but exceptionally, let's say that. The speed, fluidity of everything, plus how smooth all the movement is, it's really fucking insane. In practical terms, I guess it's almost like ineffable, but typically you can feel a good game engine right away, and Halo Infinite fucking nails it. And that's a good thing too, because in this case, the engine and combat are so fucking good that they really make up for all the other areas where Halo comes up short this time around. I feel almost like I lack the vocabulary to describe just precisely how awesome it feels to nail a brute in the face with one of those plasma containers, or narc a string of grunts with a series of smooth headshots. Like, I don't know how they did it, but the physics engine feedback, impact broadcasting of every explosion, gunshot, and plasma blast manages to be incredibly visceral and satisfying. That sharp pop you hear when enemies die with the accompanying red X that flashes across your reticle, the way laser blasts from huge cannons slam into the ground around you. It's very impressive and you really don't get tired of it. Like, it's just never not ridiculously pleasing. The shit is symphonic kinda in that way. See, shit like this right here, this is like at least 85% of why Halo is so fun. It's not all rainbows and sunshine though. Halo is still very much the king of one-shots that come out of nowhere and make you wonder what the fuck killed you. Rest assured, that shit is no less infuriating here. For better or worse though, I do recognize that's kind of part of the Halo experience, which is weird. While the frustration does stop short of inspiring any thoughts of self-harm, I'm not quite sure what that says about the design theory that is still very much at the core of Halo games. Difficulty, though, as we've discussed in the past, is a really tough thing to pin down in general, due largely in part to how subjective it can be. I explained what I felt good difficulty balancing was for a Metroidvania-style game back in the Metroid Dread review, so now let's just talk briefly about difficulty in a Halo-style game. In most Halo games, and on Legendary difficulty especially, in my view, a well-tuned difficulty is a matter of how often I die and how much agency do I feel I had to do something about it. Frequent and high number of deaths can be fine, providing the game empowered you to feel as though you had a lot of agency in deciding the outcome. That's skill cap incentivizing at work, and when done right, it's fantastic. On the other hand, too many deaths that you felt you were largely powerless to prevent, that's just frustration, it's not fun. And while Halo Infinite will definitely leave you screaming, "What the fuck killed me?" quite a bit, there almost always will be something you could have done about it. Moving on, let's wrap up this combat section with just a bit on the new weapons, tools, and vehicles you and the Chief are going to be kicking it with. Yes, there are a few new weapons. They're fine. Some are fun, some are kind of boring, some seem utterly useless. There's not really an interesting discussion to be had here, though. Either way, it's subjective. You will like certain guns, I won't like others. I'm glad that they mixed some shit up and weren't afraid to do some different or new stuff, but beyond that, it's whatever. I will say that the sheer variety is rather impressive though. Even after like 25 hours of playing it, I was still coming upon shit I hadn't seen before. That's pretty cool. Either way, the real conversation is about that fucking grapple shot, geez. I, like most, was super hesitant about the grapple shot when I first heard about it. A mechanic seemingly lifted directly out of the super successful Doom Eternal? I don't know, G. Usually you don't just copy pasta mechanics from other games, even games in a similar genre, because unless you have a deep understanding of how and why they work in the original iteration in the source game, you end up just kind of making a mess of yours. Reasonable basis for some healthy skepticism, right? Wrong. Actually, as it turns out, it's sick as fuck. Somehow, against all odds, the grapple shot ends up feeling like it should have always been there. The momentum, the way you can re-trigger and early release it, the mechanics of allowing you to grab items from a distance, the unlockable moves it enables by its interaction with enemies and stuff, makes it the closest thing to a game-changing mechanic I've seen in Halo for years. Get used to it, everybody. Halo now offers an arguably better web-swinging experience than most Spider-Man games. It truly is a strange time that we live in, and I'm here for it. Toothpaste is out of the tube, geez. Can't go back. Alright. Yeah, we gotta talk about the open world. I hate the open world genre. I almost didn't grab this game because it was open world. That's how much I hate those type of games, and why not? The so-called open world genre is a deeply troubled one, to say the very least. Extremely easy to make, but almost impossible to make well. It's often hard to know which kind you're even playing. Here's a good way to tell if you're playing one of the rare good ones. If you find yourself frequently accidentally happening upon some new fun thing to do before you even finish the current objective that you're working on, there's a good chance you found a good one. Good open world design is design that keeps you engaged and prevents you from feeling directionless and overwhelmed by too many nonsensical icons smeared all over your map with no rhyme or reason. You can't just have a bunch of markers that when you go to them, you do things. For an open world to work, things need to happen to you, and happen in an organic fashion which naturally leads you across the map from one encounter or situation to the next. Each scenario that you engage with should link to others before it that should have led you to where you are, as well as informing and setting up the next one that you will encounter as its organic consequence. It's in that way that events connect with one another and combine to make an open world actually feel like a world, like a place that exists where things are happening independent of your own agency. If each marker on your map is just an indication of a place you can go and do stuff, and those things aren't tethered or related to things that occur in other locations, you end up with a player whose influence or agency in the so-called open world ends up feeling largely passive and irrelevant unless you're doing the main story missions. And in a game where the open world is supposed to be a major selling point, that's gonna cause a fucking problem if most of that content feels immaterial. That's how you end up with players feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, and directionless, and then eventually just putting the fucking thing down. And needless to say, if your games make players feel that way, your game ain't gonna have players for very long. A well-designed open world makes you want more things to do, not wish there were less. Good open worlds are symbiotic, designed in a way where even the side missions and minor events or locations inform and relate back in a cyclical way to both themselves and the overarching story being told. Great example of this happens relatively early on in Infinite in a mission called Conservatory, I think. It wasn't previously marked on my map and I stumbled into it while I was busy doing one of the Marine Squad rescue missions. I didn't even notice the moment my Marine rescue turned into a story mission. 1 second I was battling grunts around a giant laser, and before I knew it I was blowing the thing up and delving into a recently uncovered underground cavern. Then it wasn't until halfway through that and a cutscene trigger that I finally realized, oh shit, this is a story mission. Totally seamless. And that happens constantly. Doing one objective, collecting an upgrade point or something relatively benign, and in the middle of it, I get a notification that, unbeknownst to me, the gameplay has led me straight into another larger, more significant objective. And now, without any conscious effort on the part of the player, all of a sudden I'm working on 2 goals, one minor and one major, because the design of the open world gameplay is multiplicative and symbiotic. Activities lead into one another. That's excellent design. Now, another example is how Marines dynamically spawn around you and in objectives depending on which forward operating bases you've recaptured. And to give a not a sincere credit here to Infinite, surprisingly, the Marines that spawn are useful. Not only can they survive more than a single shot or a melee from an enemy, but they can hit shit now. Pretty cool. Not a high bar, I'll admit, but one I'm glad they cleared. This has a great cumulative effect when the sight of friendlies over the next hill rushing up to hop on your Razorback makes you feel relieved or psyched because you know that, oh, wow, imagine that, they'll actually influence your moment-to-moment experience if they're with you. Cells interlinked, my G's.
Cells interlinked.
The FOBs you recapture affect the dynamics and combat balancing in the surrounding area. That in turn affects where the combat directs you across the terrain when you engage in it, which then becomes a determining factor in how you approach the map in your immediate vicinity. These factors combine to create a dynamic ecosystem of events and gameplay flow that result in what? Yes, exactly, locations that feel like actual places and not just a map full of unrelated repetitive tasks to merely be crossed off a list. A well-designed open world uses these kinds of techniques to make you want to do the objectives and interact with locations, not because they're on a list, but because it's fun. I know, it's a novel concept. They create a clear, easy to understand incentive that has an actual impact on the game world around you. Now, to inject a little nuance into the tug job I'm currently giving this game, I am by no means saying that Halo Infinite's open world is some insanely brilliant, intense war simulation of unparalleled realism or anything like that. And it speaks to just how low the standards are for what we expect out of an open world game that merely describing the base competency with which this game executes the concept comes across as overly favorable. Halo's open world is good. It's not amazing or groundbreaking by any means, but it is very good. Who saw that coming? Definitely not me. Other examples of genuinely great open world design are Skyrim, Cyberpunk, Breath of the Wild, and Metro Exodus, with an honorable mention to Final Fantasy 15. Yes, no, I'm serious. Most of that game was disjointed and narratively incomprehensible, with nothing much beyond surface level aesthetics and bare bones mechanics to offer, but the open world was one of the few things it did relatively well. So if you're thinking, Jesus, this doesn't sound very fucking easy to pull off, you'd be right. That's why there are approximately 1 billion open world games and only about 7 that are any good. The thing is, Halo definitely did not need to be an open world. Did it work in this case? Yeah, I think so. Would it have been better if we'd just gotten a traditional campaign? No, that's a much harder question. I don't know. I'm tempted to say yes, but at the same time, it was awesome making my own fun in the open world. Open worlds that are actually good are super fun. But that then, of course, begs the next logical question. Should what many people view as the core experience of a Halo game be made to play second fiddle to an open world that, while a lot of fun, is not strictly necessary? Halo has always been just another FPS for me, for better or for worse. So from that perspective, I'd say yes, I'm glad it was open world because I got about 20 more hours of enjoyment out of it than I would have if I had just played a standard 10-hour campaign. For die-hard Halo fans though, I mean, I gotta be honest, I suspect that they probably would have preferred a straight-up classic Halo campaign over this open world, as good as it may have been done. That's something y'all are going to have to grapple with individually. I can't speak for anyone other than myself in that regard. And I thought the open world was fucking fun. But if you're super into Halo and you were looking for a dedicated story-based little outing with Master Chief and his blue holographic girlfriend, you might be a little bummed out by this. Sorry to say it, but I gotta. Next, a bit on the overall presentation. There's a point where new Cortana comments upon arriving in some new Forerunner area, "Wow, this place is exactly like you'd expect." I don't know if that was a tongue-in-cheek self-referential burn or what, but it hit a little too close to the fucking mark, I think. That's roughly how I feel about the entirety of the game's visual aspects. See this? This is the title screen. You've just seen the entire game, right here. Now, does it offer quite a fine vista fairly often? It does. Does it look generally fine? It does. Does it look even nice or very competent often? Absolutely. What it does not do is surprise, awe, or seriously excite you at any point. This is Halo Infinite's most glaring flaw, at least to me. The ammo issues can be obnoxious, all the dumb herder Space Marine comic book silliness becomes a little tiresome, the plot can be a bit janky to say the least, and the big man is more surly, dour, and monosyllabic than usual. But the combat, physics, and movement are all so well done and come together so seamlessly that none of that really makes a lasting impact or significantly detracts from just how much fun this game is to play. What does really start to wear on you after a while is the knowledge that whatever is around the next corner or over the next hill is not ever going to be anything that you haven't seen a dozen variations of already. And that's a serious bummer, even more so because of how much effortless fun there is to be had here in spite of that. In fairness, there are times when at certain angles from certain vantage points at just the right light, the game can look bordering on incredible. Unfortunately, the illusion is quickly shattered by, among other things, the atrocious scaling of the tree models at a distance makes this shit look like a goofy model train set sometimes. Honestly, it's a real shame. Despite moments of potential greatness, the overall presentation ends up just a few notches above average for current gen games. Okay, now let's have a little fun and do some nitpicking. First, the name. The name Halo Infinite is fucking stupid. Just call it Halo 6 or 7, whatever it is. Halo Reach worked, and even ODST to a lesser extent because they weren't technically part of this main story arc, but it's not like this is the last Halo game. There's gonna be a Halo 8. And what are you gonna call that? Where do you go after Infinite? Infinite 2? At least Mario had a little modesty and only went to Galaxy. I guess what should we have expected though? This is from the same people that brought us Xbox 360, Xbox One, Xbox One X, Xbox Series X, and Xbox Series S. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? Jesus fuck, get your shit together. Second, the map. The map in this game is a pain in the ass to deal with, there's just no two ways about it. Maybe it's easier to move it around with the controller, I hope so, but on PC it not only requires you to use the mouse cursor to select stuff, but moving the mouse also scrolls the map, and the effect is disastrous and frustrating. Only escape pauses the game, accessing the map does not, so you must be somewhere at least temporarily safe to use it with any effect. This hassle is compounded by the overall readability or lack thereof of the map. The main problem is the icons. They're generally obtuse and not as informative as they should be. Usually, most objective markers gray out when you accomplish them, but certain types are gray when active, becoming only slightly less opaque gray when you complete them. This means that you can't ascertain the status of nearby markers and objectives with a glance, which sucks and is exacerbated by the fact that looking at the map doesn't pause the fucking game. This also means that the player needs to click an objective while the map tracking chases the cursor around just to view its summary and confirm it's been completed. You know, you didn't have to make all the icons uniform gray with only a different color border to differentiate them. You could have made each entire icon type a different color completely. The fuck? It's a total drag, bros, and an inexcusable design oversight, albeit a minor one. And while we're talking about minor gripes, what's up with the Master Chief this time around? He's a little more emo, it seems, than usual, almost like he's more of an Eastern character than a Western hero at this point. In the first few games, he was a mostly one-dimensional caricature of an 80s Hollywood action hero, but now he's become almost more ridiculous. He's straight out of a manga these days, far more Goblin Slayer than Kratos or 2005 Master Chief. And when compared to characters like Kratos, he has no personality whatsoever, or not an interesting one anyway. He's just murdering huge numbers of people and aliens, cutting a swath of genocide across the galaxy, going wherever the wind and his holographic girlfriend take him. I don't know, he's like a Western archetype, but taken to an Eastern extreme, and I'm just not sure how well that's working out. It just makes him a stubborn, obstinate dick with no defining features other than he really wants to do the thing and he wants to do the fucking shit out of it. I mean, I fuck with that, but it's not nearly as engaging or captivating as it could be, especially considering the narrative that he's a central character in. This is especially jarring if, you consider the juxtaposition of this murderous motherfucker in a space helmet surgically slaughtering his way through hordes of diminutive, shrieking little purple aliens that sound more like kids than anything really threatening. I mean, I'm not saying I truly care in any real respect, just that it's weird. And lastly, how the fuck did no one notice that the Marines spawn at your bases don't get out of the way when you drop vehicles on their heads? I mean, really, who cares? They just respawn, it has no effect on gameplay, unlike some other shooters released recently. It's a silly oversight, and the result is funny as shit to watch, but it is outstandingly fucking stupid. Oh, also, the Banished are an awful enemy. I thought these guys were called the Covenant. How are these Banished dudes any different? They don't look any different to me, they don't sound any different. I don't get it. Why create a whole new enemy splinter faction if they're just gonna be virtually indistinguishable from the original bad guys? It's confusing, redundant, and utterly unnecessary. What the fuck? Alright, time to wrap this shit up. Ultimately, and fortunately for all of us, at its core, Halo hasn't really changed at all over the years. The world just kind of changed around it and moved on. The game that was once viewed as the dude bro FPS now comes across as a campy, quirky, arcade-style sci-fi romp. Halo, now as perhaps it always was, is far more Star Siege tribes than Call of Duty or Battlefield. And thank God too, that's what it should be, as that's when it's at its best. Yes, it's relatively generic for the most part, it's not very memorable in its presentation or ideas, but the gameplay is just such effortless and non-stop fun, and the engine and mechanics feel so fucking good that it never really matters. It's a close analog to Rocket League in all the best ways, unapologetically goofy and non-technical, while simultaneously just absurd, ridiculous entertainment. Halo is a blunt instrument. It's dumb as fuck, but fun as shit. Looks like getting sloppy with the Chief is back, and geez, I'm fucking here for it. Subtracting 2 whole points for the lack of a campaign, then giving 1 back because miraculously the open world is fun, and subtracting half a point for the nitpicking and ammo issues, Halo Infinite gets an 8.5. Good job, 343. You managed to dodge the mediocrity zone this time. Now, let's see if you can pull it off again. Hey, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching and spending this little bit of your free time with us. We love you today. We love you all the way. In the end, I think your enjoyment of this game is going to hinge mostly on what sort of Halo fan you are. If you're like me, only here for the solid FPS mechanics and pulpy sci-fi fun, you're likely gonna love it. If you're a Halo diehard, there's still a lot of enjoyment to be had, but I think the story and the open world presentation are going to turn you off a bit. How much? Well, that's up to you. Next, bit of a programming note or announcement, whatever. I think we're going to start Patreon. Obviously, no content is getting paywalled or anything ridiculous like that, but people have been asking me recently how they can support the channel, and I've always said that I would only consider something like Patreon if I felt like I had a really cool idea for it. And I've got one. More on that soon once I've finalized stuff, gotten ready to present and everything, but that's something to be excited for. It's going to be awesome. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed the review. I had a ton of fun playing Halo this time around, and I think you will too. Bear in mind, just like I said about Metroid Dread, Village, and others, one good AAA game does by no means guarantee another. Keep your wallets close and stay vigilant, brothers. Remember, torrents are morally acceptable in almost all cases.
Woke up, smoke up, blunt, then I pass out. Woke up, what up, smoke up, blunt, then I back down.